Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program Ben Schuchart, who is VP of Operations at Schneider Transportation Management, and Prasad Gollapalli, who is founder and CEO at Trucker Tools. And today we're going to talk about competing on carrier and driver experience. Now, in the transportation and logistics service provider world, we often talk about rates and capacity. But competing on carrier and driver experience is, starting to emerge as a differentiator. So what does providing an enhanced carrier driver experience mean? How does technology help to enable that? And, what is the capabilities going to differentiate the leaders from the laggards moving forward? Well, those are the key questions we're going to address in today's episode. And it's great to have Ben and Prasad with us to share their insights and perspective on this topic. So Ben, Prasad, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Adrian. Prasad. Thrilled to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thank you both for having me here.
Great, Ben. We'll start with you. I mean, I'm sure many people in the industry are familiar with Schneider and your role in the industry, but maybe there are some folks that are not. But I always like to find out a little bit about our guests on the program, a little bit about the companies they come from. So before we kind of dive into the topic of carrier and driver experience, why don't you tell us briefly a little bit about Schneider Transportation Management, what types of services you offer, which industries you serve, things like that, and what's your role at the company?
Great. Yeah, so, and you can kind of see it over my shoulder, the orange truck here. But Schneider, 85-year trucking company, one of the largest carriers in the country. And so people identify Schneider with the orange truck. Really, at Schneider, we have three main service offerings. And that would be our truckload division, intermodal, and then logistics. And now in logistics, our Schneider brokerage is known as Schneider Transportation Management. So I'm representing our brokerage division today. My current role is Vice President of Operations, which really entails everything with the brokerage operations. But really important for this conversation is our carrier strategy and everything to do with our carrier sales. At Schneider, I've been with Schneider for just over 19 years. I started on our truckload side in customer service and really kind of grew up learning the asset side of the business. And for, I'd say probably the last 16 years, I have been on our brokerage side. So the majority of my career has been logistics, non-asset, brokerage, with a heavy focus on the carrier experience.
Well, great background. Certainly, Schneider is one of the leaders and innovators in the industry, and you certainly can't miss those orange trucks out in the road. And I remember, early on in my career, I asked someone, I don't know if it's true or not, why orange? And the reason that I was told was that they did some studies, and that's the color that stands out the most in kind of twilight conditions. So from a safety standpoint,
sure,
that was the reason for that color. It certainly it's become an iconic part of the company.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Omaha orange. So it's the safest color. And you think, I'm in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and it is hunting season. And so everyone in the woods is wearing orange. But you're on the highway. Omaha orange is the furthest you can see away. So safety being our first core value, it just makes sense that all the trailers are orange. And, it's really built into quite a brand.
Absolutely. Well, let's go right into the topic now, Ben. I mean, like I said in my opening comments, there's a lot of discussion today about, particularly on the shipper side, right, about competing on customer experience. But for brokers and third-party logistics providers, competing on carrier and driver experience is, equally, important. I mean, what does providing an enhanced carrier driver experience mean, and why is it so important today?
Sure. Well, I think it's really important today, and it's always been important. It's important today because drivers got options, carriers got options, but also we're in a tough market for the small carrier to find options that really make sense for them. And so when I say options, when you think of a carrier, what they're looking for with a relationship with a broker or 3PL is someone that has a lot of load options, a lot to choose from, so they can reduce empty miles, reduce their deadhead, looking for a relationship where they can run their business. What I say, also is really important is with a relationship for a carrier has been transparency. We hear that word a lot in the last 2 to 3 years. When I think of transparency, I think of transparency of rates. So, one of the things that, we'll talk about on this discussion with Prasad is, even things that you hear things like a book it now, what is that? And that's a way for a carrier to show a transparent rate where a carrier can select it, book it at that rate. So, for carriers, transparency, choosing variety of loads. Another thing that definitely we're hearing a lot of, is digital brokerage or digital. And when you think of digital, you can think of digital, you can think of a lot of data. I would tell you the carriers I work with and talk to, especially some of the smaller fleets, they're not really worried about data, but where they're looking where digital comes in is speed. So when I think of digital, I think of speed. And so I think it's important to carriers of how quickly you're available for them to get them the available loads they need at the right time. There's a tremendous amount of waste of carriers looking for available freight, even today. So I kind of think of, transparency, digital as in speed, those type of offerings to help improve the carrier experience.
Yeah, those are great points there. And certainly we've done a lot of, episodes, and we've written a lot of blogs around, the digital transformation, what's happening there. But I love that, because a lot of times it's about getting that data and business intelligence and analytics. And certainly that's part of it. But I think in the context that you're talking about, the speed dimension of digital transformation, particularly as it relates to carriers and booking that next load and keeping, generating revenue, if you will, for them, that's a key, consideration. So Prasad, that brings me to you and kind of building on what we just talked about with Ben here. Obviously to stay in business, carriers need to keep the trucks moving, hauling as many loads as possible, obviously quickly, safely, and on time. And this is especially true for these owner operators, small carriers, where this is really, at the heart of their business, where, a difference in booking a load or not can make or break their livelihood. But finding and booking that next load has traditionally, been a challenge. Why is that?
What you said is right. And in today's market, for carriers to stay afloat, they have to consistently book these freight. And one thing that Ben touched earlier is very, very critical. The time it takes for a carrier to book a load basically acts as a buffer in between two loads. And going back to your question on why is it difficult to rebook another load, we live in a society where everybody is focused on this current load. How do I maximize my revenue on this? Well, that is very, very important. Oftentimes, the small carriers miss the focus on what's coming after this load. And when they don't think about that next load or that reload, it could take them into a market where they may have to spend a little bit more time finding that next reload, which pretty much wipes out the profits they make on this load. But more importantly, in a market like this where the capacity is soft, that could put a small carrier out of business very easily. Forget about the small carriers. Today we see even the larger ones are sometimes going out of business. It's a constant struggle for these carriers to keep their profits and their asset utilization high. Good analogy would be it's like playing golf. Every shot you hit, it should set you up for a better reshot or a better shot. The way we look at trucker tools is every load that a carrier picks up, how do we help them with a better reload? So what markets they go into? So I'm going to go back into what Ben said earlier. In the world of digital space today, the technology should help these carriers eliminate all the noise and quickly get to, I got two load options. One would take me to, let's say, Chicago, the other one would take me to Atlanta. What is my reload ability in these two markets, given today's market conditions? And with that, quickly looking at it and saying, I would prefer to go to Chicago versus Atlanta. And in oftentimes when they work with companies like Schneider, the same broker has a better reload available. And connecting these dots is very important for the technology. So technology could play a big role in keeping these carriers afloat and, more importantly, more profitable.
You raise a lot of great points there. I mean, as you were talking, some of the things you said, it goes back to, the old saying, right? Time is money, right? So if you're spending a lot of time trying to figure out where your next load is going to come from, you're basically, losing, money there. And then in terms of, a lot of times it's been kind of this more manual process from when I talk to a lot of carriers, right? It's been, the load boards or picking up the phone or, and it's something that they haven't really thought about, in terms of, like you said, what's from the golf analogy, what's going to be my next shot after that. And I think this is where the technology comes in, obviously, because now with all this data, transparency that Ben talked about and so forth, you now have that visibility to one of the things, the other buzz terms you hear a lot in the industry is, making smarter decisions faster. And, that's always been the case with, BI and analytics when it pertains to shippers and various aspects of their supply chain. But now I think what we're talking about here is really empowering carriers to make smarter decisions faster in terms of, how they're going to keep their assets moving, how they're going to keep the drivers happy and coming back home more frequently and all those things that are important to them. So Ben, that brings me, back to you, talking about technology here now. I mean, how is technology helping Schneider deliver that enhanced carrier driver experience? And, what factors ultimately led you to partner up with Trucker Tools?
Yeah, I mean, some of the factors specifically on carrier experience, Schneider a carrier also, right? So we have a lot of experience, what works for us. And, when I think of Schneider and the freight, the assets they're moving, these are some of the blue chip customers in the shipping industry. And there's a lot of focus on quality freight, productive freight that doesn't have a lot of waste either on, either at the pickup or in the delivery. How do you maximize drive time? So I think what part of how what we're trying to do is leverage the Schneider freight to the carrier community, the small carrier community, but use technology to improve the buy experience. So specifically with Trucker Tools, one of the features that we're using with Trucker Tools is this Book It Now feature. So all of our available freight is available on the Trucker Tools app. So the idea is the carriers that are using the Trucker Tools app, they can sort the loads that are, available for them. They can kind of aggregate the view of all the available freight, and all the freight characteristics are right there in the app with the rate that you can book it now. But you can click the Book It Now, and that load, what's called digital, right? That load will get assigned to you right from our TMS to the carrier. So, the idea why Trucker Tools in the Book It Now is we're very interested in the Trucker Tools users, the carrier base. Go to where the carriers are. I would tell you, in my experience, not all carriers buy the same way. Some carriers still want to fax back and forth. Some carriers want to negotiate everything on the phone. But there is definitely an emerging trend of carriers that want to do things digital, that prefer a mobile. They may not prefer 25 different mobile apps, but they're looking for a mobile app or 3 that will help them aggregate volume to pick and then make it easy for me, make it easy for the buy experience where I can click that load like I'm buying something on Amazon from my preferred customers. So that's really the idea behind Trucker Tools is how do you reach that carrier base, that customer base, carrier side that Prasad has with the Schneider freight.
It's funny that you mentioned the, kind of that Amazon kind of feeling, because as you were describing it, that's what I was thinking about. You have that buy it now, functionality within Amazon and that one-click shopping, if you will. And I think it is another example of how things happening in the B2C world, the business to consumer world, and how we're all consumers at the end of the day. We all use Amazon, we all use Apple and Google and so forth, and our mobile apps for our own personal lives. And I think what we're seeing now is some of those things that we like about the ease of use and leveraging technology to make our lives easier in the personal realm, kind of bringing those capabilities into the business realm. And I think this is a great example of that in transportation, which brings me back to you, Prasad. I mean, I think, Ben talked a little bit about it, but I was kind of curious, in terms of how the Book It Now process, ultimately works. And maybe, what are some of the more, common questions that you get from carriers and brokers about it?
So, Book It Now as a platform or as a process is centered around the carrier experience. So, the idea behind this product is how do we make it, like you said, Amazon one-click, purchase kind of a thing. How do you make it easier for the carriers to quickly book a load and immediately get the rate confirmation back? So it's an instant booking of a load. And so there are a lot of factors that go behind this. For a carrier to book a load from a broker such as Schneider, they would have to compare a bunch of loads. Two, they have to have a rate to it associated with it. So they're not calling someone, right? And more importantly, that load needs to be aligned with the carrier's availability, real-time availability, lane preferences, equipment type matching, the various things that go with it, keeping the deadhead low. So with the technology available today, we were able to build a more comprehensive tool that takes care of all of these decisions quickly for the carrier and ultimately put a short list of loads that they can go through. On a mobile device, if you ask the carrier to go through 50 loads, that process slows down by itself. So our idea is just give the top 5 loads that they need to be looking at, eliminate all the noise in the process, and quickly make a easy way for the carrier to look at and say, hey, if I book this load, what's my reloadability versus the other load? And in many ways, we are thinking, or the platform is thinking like a carrier for the carrier. So when we do that, we have to think like a carrier and say, if I'm a carrier, I got 20 loads, but the 15 of them, they don't fit my criteria, so let's not waste time on that. Let's look at the top 5. And then we let the carrier make the decision. So the carrier is in control at this point, right? That's one of the key things. Then oftentimes when we talk about digital platform, people forget one key aspect, that is the feedback. When a carrier books the load, how quickly they get the rate confirmation. So we set a standard pretty high for this one as almost real time, instantaneous, within few minutes, right? These are the things that the carrier can live with. If the carrier has to wait for an hour or 2 hours, then we have already lost that carrier's interest in the platform. So we made it almost real time and instantaneous. So when a carrier books the load, the rate confirmation gets triggered, like Ben said earlier, in their TMS, which sends the process. And the common questions that, I'll start with the carriers. Carriers are more interested, when they look at a platform like this, their key aspect is it real time? So am I looking at loads that are currently available? So think about this. When you buy something on Amazon, after you click one click and purchase it, and Amazon says, well, obviously this item is not available for sale. People won't be happy. So the same applies to the load. Keeping that information current is an absolute must. The second part is real time. When you purchase something, if you have to wait for an hour to see if you got that item or not, people lose interest. So that's a key aspect the carriers have. And a lot of industry information or the market information, such as what markets are active, whether this load aligns with my load lane preference, that will help the carrier make the decision fast. So that's all on the carrier side. So from a broker side, the common questions are, I think we're still living in a world where, Schneider has been a leader in this space and they're really pioneer. When they look at a digital platform, most of the brokers have the mindset of it's a 0 and 1, 0%, 100%. They all think I have to go 100% towards digital platform. Assuming, in layman terms, 100% of my freight will go through the digital. That's actually not true. We tell customers when they come on board, you have to pick a number between 0 and 99. It's probably a smaller percent initially, and it will ramp up. That's a very realistic expectation to look at a Book It Now platform. If 20% of your freight goes through this, that's great. It's a good starting point. Some companies are much more further down the line on this because they have already established a good rating system, a good TMS process, and a good support staff for exception handling. They can get much higher percentages, but those who are not prepared, they can start with a smaller percentage. So education is a key part of this platform. There is no magic dust that somebody can sprinkle on these things and all of a sudden everything is automated. Even the digital brokers are not saying that, the so-called digital brokers. So, these are some of the things. There is a lot of learning here. And to wrap up that thought, it's a continuous process. It's not a one. So when somebody adopts to a digital platform, it's not a done. It's not the end. It is just the process. They get started on it. How well you improve your process to move all your freight through that is up to you as a broker, and for a carrier too, how well you adopt it.
A lot of information there. It sounds like early on, some of the things you said early on, in terms of the speed and accuracy and the visibility are key components of that in terms of building that trust among the carrier base that, hey, the loads that I'm seeing are real, they're still available. And, when you book it, it's going to be booked within, minutes and not, have to wait and so forth. So I think that's a critical consideration. One of the things that we probably won't get into it today, but I'm sure, when you talked about some of the considerations, there's a lot of probably, I would assume, machine learning, AI type of things in the background that are kind of crunching in the background to provide the carriers with those five or so loads that make the most sense for them in terms of, what the algorithm is, so that probably gets a little bit too technical to talk about, what that is. But again, I think that there is a lot going on behind the scenes here. It strikes me to do that. And then obviously I think the third piece, which I think Ben alluded to, and you alluded to a little bit, is the integration piece, right? So to make it seamless, right? It sounds like it's integrated with your TMS system, right, Ben? In terms of, what's happening in the mobile app is integrated with your TMS system, so that data and the process gets triggered, as automated as fashion as possible.
Yeah, correct. And if I could throw something in there, Adrian, the integrations, I love the integration. It's important because it's real. These loads are real loads. So kind of one of the things in the broker industry as a carrier that I wouldn't be excited about are things called will call loads or can get freight. So where a lot of waste happens for a carrier is calling in on loads to brokers and the broker says, well, I'll call you back. I don't have that load, but it's a will call load. So I got to call the customer and see if it's available. In a book it now process with us, this isn't will call freight. This is not can get freight. This is real freight with the exact pickup delivery, the commodity, the weight, because what you're shopping for. So, I think kind of the experience of shopping on Amazon or maybe shopping on Craigslist for ourselves, there's a different type of experience on what I'm getting. And so that's kind of what I really like about the integrations with the TMS. It's feeding actual information, data, so the carrier knows what to expect. And that's why you can get this buy experience in minutes versus what sometimes used to take hours because the transaction is complete right there. So the data of course it's important, but it's just enabling a true book it now feature that goes right to the carrier, which reduces a ton of waste for everyone involved.
Yeah, that's a great point. It goes back to that speed that you talked about, earlier. So that brings me, and you kind of touched upon it a little bit here, Ben. How do you ultimately measure, customer driver experience? In other words, do you have any metrics or way of tracking your performance in this area? How do you know that this is a providing value to the carriers and providing value to you?
Yeah, sure. With carriers, we've got our traditional metrics you would look at as far as like a volume, a service, a load acceptance. We really look at carrier loyalty as measured as how much they continue to buy from Schneider. We have about almost 35,000 active carriers now. And I would tell you there some brokers maybe say they have 80,000. Really what it is at some point you're just adding more and more one truck guys because the market's just made up of so many small carriers. So although we may not have the largest carrier population, we really look at, are we reusing carriers? So we get feedback from carriers through marketing and through some of those surveys you do. But really what we're looking is, are we getting deeper with the carrier? Are we reloading the carrier? Are we getting more of their trucks, their share? And are we doing it over a certain time? We want carriers that, legacy carriers, we want carriers that have been with us for years and we're deep together. So, besides loads, we offer fuel discounts, tire discounts, other carrier services to help the small carriers kind of aggregate Schneider's purchasing to help the small carriers. So we really look at how long have the carriers been working with us and how much of the share of their trucks do we have. That's success.
Yeah, no, I think those are great, metrics there are great things to look at. And I think that really does show, the value that ultimately you're providing to the carriers as well as, the business there. We're running short on time here, so I'm just going to go to my last question here. Ben, I'll start with you, and then Prasad, you can wrap it up. I mean, as a way to wrap up, I mean, what, when it comes to providing or competing on customer, on carrier and driver experience, I mean, what attributes or capabilities will differentiate the leaders from the laggards moving forward?
Well, from a Schneider point of view, is really start with carrier mind and have carrier empathy and be an advocate for the carrier. So what does the carrier need? What is the carrier looking for? And then how do you build technology and tools around that carrier to improve their buy experience so we can spend time in the areas that we should. So we kind of elevate where we're working with carriers. And that, again, is being an advocate for the carrier and making sure we're getting the right loads to the carrier at the right time. And that the carrier is consistently working with Schneider over and over again. And that's our focus. In whatever forum or buying behavior they choose, we want to make sure we have an option for the carrier.
Great point. Prasad, anything to add there?
I mean, what Ben said is absolutely right. It's the carrier utilization, how well that relationship is built. From a technology vendor point, if you're providing services in this, the goal, the way you measure success is, first of all, having a growth mind. It's not a fixed mind, meaning our solution is never done. It's a continuous process, and the metrics that you use are how much of your carrier base. So we have a large carrier base. Some of it is overlapping with what Schneider uses today, right? But we look at our own carrier base and say, what percentage are using or adopting to this platform? So, with today's technology, you can see if a carrier is looking at book it now loads and ultimately booking a load versus not booking a load, or when you provide 5 opportunities for the carrier, they book one of the loads and reject the other 4, right? So why did they reject the other 4? So it's having that intuitive mind and like almost a questioning and trying to understand rather than assuming you already know the answer. Because the moment we assume that we already know the answer, we stop learning from this process. If this is so early in the process, I think in the next 2 to 3 years, the Book It Now platform is going to be the biggest game changer. So when it is going to be such a, or so early in the process, right? Us having a very open mind with the thought that we don't know all the answers yet is very important for us to really build it out for the future as we are moving.
Certainly, a lot of innovation has taken place in the transportation industry over the past, 5 years. And certainly I think it's accelerated over the past couple of years. And I think to your point, it's only going to continue, in the years ahead. And I think innovators and companies that embrace, technology have a focus on customer and carrier experience, right? Are going to be the ones that are ultimately going to, continue to succeed, moving forward. Well, like I said, at the end of all our episodes, we always just manage to scratch the surface on these topics, but both of you provided some great insights and advice on this topic. So again, Ben, Prasad, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks. Pleasure.
Thank you both.
Great. I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Trucker Tools website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Ben or Prasad, you can post it there, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.